Good Wednesday morning to you. Welcome on in the Morning Jocks. Jocks 94.5. Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order. And now, since we've got the midweek games out the way, it's Iron Bowl week, baby. Iron Bowl of basketball set for this Saturday, and both teams coming off some impressive wins last night, handling their business, both Auburn and Alabama. Alabama, when we talked about it yesterday, talked about maintaining the lead. How can you find a way to be consistent in that? They did just that over in Austin, Texas, taking on the Longhorns. And Auburn, this is how Auburn is going to be dangerous. When you're not asking Janai Broome to go out there and do everything, it's the pieces around him that elevate their game. And they go out and, they fought off a pretty gritty Vanderbilt team to the tune of 80-68. Let's start there, the number one team in college basketball with the Auburn Tigers. Last night, they took a trip up there to Nashville, Tennessee, and just throughout the game, it felt like it was one that Auburn did not take Vanderbilt lightly. Vanderbilt was given everything they possibly could. It ended up being a great ball game because at the half, it was only 34-32, and it kind of felt that Vanderbilt was starting to find a little bit of momentum. But then Auburn starts to wear on you, making the tough shots for Vanderbilt. And then their guys started to step up. Chamie Johnson, Denver Jones. And we know what Janai Broome is to this team. But I think last night is exactly what Auburn needed to see from the collective. One, how did you respond after that loss to Florida, not letting them beat you twice? But also, I think that they see now it takes everybody to step their game up. And I think you got that on full display, and to the tune of 80-68 over Vanderbilt. Conrad, what's your thoughts about Auburn last night?
It was a good basketball game, and Auburn, they had their work cut out for them, and I thought, similar to the Florida game, right? You get out early, except it looked a little different when it's 15-0 on the road against a team like Vanderbilt, and you're like, okay, well, Auburn, this is the response we were expecting to see after their first loss in conference play. And but like the Florida game, they get out to the big start, and then Vanderbilt just starts chipping their way back, and it's a one-score game at halftime, and you're like, okay, all right, Vanderbilt's kind of started to settle in. Auburn's went a little cold offensively, and then the first 8 or 9 minutes, I guess, of the second half, it was pretty much back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It was great basketball. And you just felt like Vanderbilt, they had found their mojo, and maybe Auburn was just maybe a little caught off guard that Vanderbilt had been able to come back the way that they did. But then how big was, Chamie Johnson was exceptional last night for Auburn. There was one point there with about 11, 12 minutes left in the game where he scored 9 straight points by himself. And you went from I think Auburn was down 8 to up 1 at that point, and Vanderbilt had started to pull away, and then Chamie Johnson just kind of took the game over, and that was essentially all she wrote, because at that point Auburn was just able to carry the momentum on. And but he was so impressive, like you said. Janai Broome again. We saw against the Florida game, and we have to remind ourselves that he is still not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And you can definitely see that he's a little beat up as well. I know Chad Baker-Mazar was beat up. I know Bruce Pearl was talking about that after he had to come out of the Florida game. But how about Denver Jones as well?
Yes,
Somebody
sir.
that scored 0 points the other night against Florida, and just, not the kind of performance that you're used to seeing from him. But he comes back with 21 points. He was huge for Auburn as well. So, no, hey, you'll take a road win in the SEC. It ends up being double digits. You end up covering. A lot of people are happy because we know that's the most important thing at the end of the day, right? So, good win for Auburn, and the way that they closed out that game I thought was really, really impressive, because it would have been easy for them to just kind of, give up a little bit and let Vanderbilt continue to do their thing. But, also credit to Vanderbilt for coming back the way that they did, and it just wasn't a great shooting night for them.
Yep.
And if it had been a little better, maybe they would have gotten the win, or we would have gotten overtime. But 3 of 17 from deep, that was kind of it.
It's not ideal.
No, it's not.
It's not an ideal number, but I think to that point, because Auburn defensively, they made it difficult for them. And even when Vanderbilt had shots, when they were open, they still weren't falling. So it just kind of felt that, okay, on top of Auburn's suffocating defense, even when you are open, you're missing shots. And I think that for Auburn to have guys like a Denver Jones and a Chaney Johnson to have those types of games, you feel confident about this group because, one, they had to step up when Janai Broome was out, and now that he's may not be at 100%, you're still seeing these guys still find a way to chip in. I think one of the things that I came away from yesterday with Auburn is their style is different from Alabama. The pace is different, but their attacks are still the same. Like, they're almost in the same boat of let's get to the cup, get fouled, go to the free throw line, or let's shoot a three. And I think a lot of it is they have a little bit more set design in their play calls. But also I think that for a lot of these other guys, like I think for Dylan Cardwell, what you're asked for him to do, he's not an offensive threat, but he's going to have to be able to put up a few more points if Auburn really wants to make it a long run in the NCAA tournament, because I do think that a big man presence is still needed, because you even see it with Alabama where, yeah, they play at a fast pace, but their bigs are still active. Like, they're stretching, they're setting screens, they're being physical on both sides of the floor. And I think for Auburn, when you see a game like this, and to Chaney Johnson's point, to your point about Chaney Johnson, it's, okay, he was fine. He got the hot hand, and Auburn didn't take it away from him. They're like, nah, go do your thing, big dog. We're rocking with you now. And I mean, you see the Janai Broome, he didn't seem frustrated. It's like, okay, hey, he's got the hot hand. Let's find a way to get it done. If I got to grab some offensive rebounds, if I got to do the dirty work, so be it. I'm going to get mine, but I want to make sure that in the end that Auburn was victorious, and that's exactly what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, and I mean, I think to your point about Cardwell, I mean, he's going to get his minutes because of how big of a presence he is defensively, right? But that's where it comes with, somebody that, commands those kinds of minutes because of his defensive presence. If he can continue to develop himself offensively, that's just going to make you that much better. But again, at this point in the season, it just kind of is what it is with guys' roles and people still trying to figure things out. But it is cool that, even with Janai Broome back in the mix now, I mean, this felt like, I know Janai got his last night, but it felt kind of like one of the games when he was out with injury, right? Where you had, okay, so tonight it was, Denver Jones and Chaney Johnson that go off for 20 points, and they kind of lead the way. And so you're still getting, that effort from other guys stepping up when, Chad Baker-Mazara has 0 points last night coming back from the injury in the Florida game and just didn't quite look like his normal self, offensively speaking. But you got guys that are going to pick up the slack. So, no, I mean, this was, again, it was a trap game for Auburn. You're going on the road. We know it's coming up in a few days in Coleman Coliseum. So to be able to go and get a win and be able to close it out and finish it by double digits, you can't really ask for a whole lot more in SEC play.
Yeah, and going to Denver Jones, doesn't it feel like this? We had the same conversation about Denver Jones last year about this time where, okay, they know they're in the backstretch of the season and the guys are going to have to step up. And we got it from Denver last night with 21 points. And again, that's what you're going to need. Todd Pettiford giving you 9 off the bench, and also Chaney Johnson again with 20 points coming from the bench as Auburn knocks off Vanderbilt 80-68. And now we turn the page in the game, the 8:00 game for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We had conversations yesterday of like, hey, you handled your business up until this point. How do you respond back, and how do you maintain, again, a road game in the SEC against the Texas team? Again, their schedule their record is not very indicative of how they are, but Alabama did exactly what they needed to do on both sides of the floor. And I think that what we saw from Alabama last night was, all right, now, if they start making these 3-point shots, they are going to be difficult to stop. When you're 17 from 29 from 3, oh yeah, you're gonna be a problem for just about anybody. 61% from the field, and you handled your business at the free throw line. This was an overall complete game from Alabama that we hadn't seen in a while, but on both sides of the floor, you felt like, okay, yeah, Alabama knows what's at stake. They know what the road is for them, because when you look at the backstretch of their schedule, it's absolutely brutal as well. So you're like, okay, you get this one, you got the Iron Bowl on Saturday, and let's see where this thing goes. Because I do think Auburn and Alabama are now on that collision course of somebody has to take this SEC regular season title, and I'm excited to see what it does. But Alabama knocks off Texas 103-80, and from the jump, it felt that, okay, Texas is not ready for the track meet. And I think that Alabama exposed that. And when you were as hot as they were, last night, they're going to be difficult to stop. And I think that what you got was a complete game from Alabama. And it just rises. It makes the intrigue for the Iron Bowl of basketball Saturday that much more because it seems like both teams are hitting at all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a shooting performance, it was the best shooting performance from deep they've had in conference play, and one of the best games. I mean, and probably the best game they've had all season, honestly, just overall. And you turned the ball over 17 times, and you still scored over 100 and won the game by 23 points. So you can live with that. Again, that's something we've talked about all year with this team is the turnovers are at some point that is going to come back and bite you, and you just hope that it is something that can be addressed a little bit. Or if you are going to have a game like that in the postseason, that it comes along with 60% shooting night, so you can kind of cover it up a little bit. But it was a little ugly at first. Just kind of back and forth between Alabama and Texas. And honestly, just thank God that Texas was missing so many shots that they had early on because, I mean, they were getting solid looks. They just weren't able to hit anything. And that kept Alabama in it and to where they weren't getting down, by 8-10 points, anything like that early on in the game. But, I think the biggest thing for this game, and we kind of just talked about it with Cardwell and Auburn, but this was by far the best game that Jaron Stevenson's had all year long. He had 22 points, which is the most of any Alabama player last night. He goes 4 or 5 from deep, and he's a guy that, I think a lot of people have maybe been scratching their heads at times like, man, he's in the starting lineup a lot. He's still getting a lot of minutes, and just offensively speaking, I mean, I think he would openly tell anybody this. He's been pretty atrocious, honestly, this year. Offensively, he's been bad. And so for last night to see, all right, you still have that confidence. Here we are 11 games into SEC play, and you're still, going at it. And, to find him get hot from deep. And he was just making plays all throughout. And so that was really, really good to see. And that's another piece where if he starts to get going offensively, no, you don't need him to give you 22 points every night. But if that's somebody that can give you 10 points a night, that's a big difference than from the, 4 to 5 points he's been giving you at night, right? And so, because we know what he can do defensively and as a facilitator at times. And so that was really, really good to see last night. But Mark Sears, he goes off for 18 points as well. You have, Aiden Holloway, he goes for 18 points. LeBaron Philon gives you 15. Diabate gives you 13. So, yeah, all around, I mean, it was outside of the turnovers, it was about as complete a game as you could look for, at least offensively speaking. So, I mean, that was a good win for Alabama. I mean, Trey Johnson was great last night for Texas. He was about all they had at times.
Yeah, right.
But, there's a reason that he's going to be a lottery pick this summer in the NBA draft as a freshman. So, no, hey, great win for Alabama. Same thing as Auburn, right? It was a trap game. Didn't want to get caught looking ahead to Saturday, and now you got some momentum. I mean, again, going on the road in the SEC, winning a game by double digits, you're going to take it. Even if that comes with a few more turnovers than you would like, you can live with that. You'll move on, and we'll work on it in practice.
Absolutely. Just going through the rest of the SEC games last night, Florida knocks off Mississippi State 81-68. Texas A&M jumps on Georgia 69-53. And then we have a top 15 matchup with Kentucky and Tennessee, as Tennessee falls on the road in Rupp Arena to Kentucky 75-64. And I don't know, man. Kentucky, to me, the more I watch them, the more I'm like, okay, this is not, I have to erase out of my mind, like, this is not the Coach Calipari Kentucky. They look good at times. They're like, oh my gosh, like the old Kentucky is back. Then they find slip ups like the Arkansas game a couple days ago, and it's like, okay, this is not Coach Cal's team anymore. I have to figure out what they do. But then they go out and they beat up on a top 5 ranked Tennessee team at home. And I think that when you look at the top of the SEC, it's at least Auburn, Alabama. You throw Florida in the mix too. I still think Tennessee is one of the better teams in the SEC as well, but it's those middle of the pack SEC teams that are just so, like, I can't really just put my finger on it, because it's like, okay, yeah, they're good enough to beat a lot of these top teams. They're also inconsistent enough to get blown out by some of these top teams. But then when you see a Kentucky beat up on Tennessee the way that they did, it's like, okay, here we go again. It's just the SEC as a whole has just been so much fun to watch this year because game in and game out, you're sitting there like, hey, man, if you do not handle your business, if you do not jump on these teams early, you will find yourself clawing and scratching trying to get a win. And I think Tennessee is starting to fall victim to that of, okay, the loss to Vanderbilt. You're like, come on, man. Like you can't solidify yourself at the top and find the consistency when you're losing games like that. But then Kentucky comes up and tells you shows you, hey, we're still Big Blue Nation up here.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say for Kentucky, I mean, you look and you go, all right, you have 7 losses. Like, okay, I mean, it's not terrible, but maybe that's, not what you would have expected or the Kentucky standard or whatever you want to call it. And then you look and you go, okay, but you have 6 wins over teams that were ranked inside the top 10 this season, which is the most of any team in college basketball this year. And it's just, okay, yep, I can see why you're still ranked up there pretty highly, even though you have, a good bit of losses. It's because you've beaten a lot of really, really good teams this year. And then, now if you're Tennessee, it's, I think you were hoping for a split, obviously. I mean, you wanted to win the game, but, now just looking at, all right, so you have, because I look at Florida, right? That's a wash with Tennessee because you got blown out the first time, then you blew them out the second time. All right, well, you had Kentucky come up to Rocky Top, take care of business up there. All right, well, this is your chance to get even and kind of, go, and because that's how it's got to be with some of these games in the SEC, right? It's a lot to ask, it's a lot to ask Alabama or Auburn to beat the other one twice, right? And I'm not saying that one of them won't do that, but, I think in a lot of these, you're just hoping for a split. And, for Tennessee now, I'm with you. I mean, they're still one of the better teams in the conference. They're still one of the better teams in the country. But I just feel like every game we go through, Alabama and Auburn continue to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And I would even throw Florida in there as like the third team right now over something like a Tennessee. And it's just for Tennessee, man, when their defense is good and they get going offensively, they're great. But when they don't have, when they just don't have the juice offensively, I mean, even last night in a game against Kentucky, you're not battling to 100. You're just trying to get into the upper 70s, and that's a struggle for them. So, but it really is just crazy. And, even yesterday hearing after, we got done on 3-man front, Paul had Jay Billis on, and I mean, Jay Billis straight up said this is the best basketball conference he's ever seen, like in a single season, what the SEC is doing this year. And, we can say that all you want, but then you hear somebody that he's been doing this for a long time and a guy that is a Duke guy and an ACC guy.
Right.
And, probably doesn't say those things lightly. It really does just kind of, it's a testament to how good the league has been this year and just how crazy some of these games are. I mean, you mentioned the A&M game last night. Georgia's up big on them at halftime. You come out in the second half, Texas A&M goes on a 27-4 run. They win the game by double digit. Like they're down double digits at halftime, and then they just flip a switch at halftime. It's absolutely wild. And, we got 7 games left, so enjoy it.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. Your text messages, your calls, just reacting to what you saw last night. Auburn's win over Vanderbilt, Alabama win over Texas, and how this sets up for the Iron Bowl of basketball, the first edition on Saturday. Want to hear from you. Keep the phone lines open, text line open, always open here on Morning Jocks. Again, 205-834-9450. We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Jocks 94.5.